Jake Daniels had lived alone on a remote island for 5 years. After the world he once knew crumbled into chaos, he chose solitude. The world outside was falling apart with wars, pandemics, and governments collapsing. The quiet isolation of the island gave him peace. He had no neighbors, no news, no distractions, just the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, the rustling of the trees, and the chirping of birds. It was a simple life, but it was his. Each morning, Jake would wake up to the sound of the waves and the warm sunlight streaming through the small window of his hut. The sun had risen over the horizon, its rays casting long shadows on the beach. His small cabin sat near the edge of the forest, a perfect spot to see the sunrise and feel the world slowly waking up. His routine was simple: gather food from his small garden, check his fishing nets, and spend time repairing whatever needed fixing. It wasn't much, but it was enough for him. Jake had left behind the world he once knew. He used to be a part of society, living in a bustling city, working long hours in a job that offered little satisfaction. But when everything changed, when the governments collapsed and the wars began, he realized that the life he had built wasn't sustainable. The island gave him a fresh start. There, he was free from the chaos. He had everything he needed to survive: fresh water from a stream, fruit from the trees, and fish from the sea. And most importantly, he had peace. But even on the island, Jake could not escape the sense of loneliness that had crept into his heart over the years. Sometimes, as he stood on the beach, watching the endless stretch of ocean, he felt the weight of isolation pressing down on him. He had no one to talk to, no one to share his thoughts with. But the idea of returning to civilization was unthinkable. The world was too unpredictable now. One evening, as the sky turned orange with the setting sun, Jake sat outside his hut, eating a simple meal of fish and fruit. He was about to go inside when he noticed something strange: a bright streak of light crossing the sky. At first he thought it was a shooting star, but then it grew brighter, almost blindingly so. The light was too large, too controlled. It was something more than a star falling. His heart raced. He stood up and moved towards the beach, his eyes fixed on the source of the light. It grew larger, moving toward the island. He could see now that it wasn't a meteor, but a spacecraft of some kind. It was a small, glowing object that crashed into the forest just beyond the beach with a thunderous sound. Jake froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. But curiosity overcame him. He grabbed his flashlight and made his way toward the crash site, his footsteps crunching through the underbrush. The forest was quiet, save for the sound of his own breath and the distant crashing of the waves. As he approached the wreckage, he could see the remnants of a small ship, metal twisted and scorched, smoke rising from the crash site. But what caught his attention wasn't the ship. It was the figure lying next to it. At first, Jake thought it was a person, but as he got closer, he realized that it was something, or someone, entirely different. A small alien woman lay unconscious on the ground, her skin shimmering with a soft, iridescent glow. Her clothes were unlike anything Jake had ever seen: sleek, metallic, and adorned with strange symbols that seemed to shift as the light hit them. Her face was delicate, with large violet eyes that were closed in unconsciousness. Her hair, if you could call it that, was a mass of shimmering tendrils that seemed to float around her head. Jake's first instinct was to run. He had never seen anything like this before. He had heard stories of alien encounters, but he never thought it would happen to him. But then he saw that she was hurt. Her chest was rising and falling shallowly, her breathing labored. Despite her strange appearance, Jake knew he couldn't leave her here. He gently knelt beside her, his hands shaking as he reached out to check for a pulse. To his relief, he felt the faint beat of her heart. She was alive, but barely. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "Hey, can you hear me?" he said softly, his voice shaky. There was no response. She remained unconscious, her body still and limp. Jake glanced around, unsure of what to do next. He wasn't a doctor, but he had learned a lot about survival over the years. He knew how to treat basic wounds, how to stitch up cuts, and how to keep himself alive in the wilderness. But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. After a moment of hesitation, Jake made his decision. He couldn't just leave her there. He carefully lifted her into his arms, being as gentle as he could, and carried her back to his hut. When they reached the cabin, Jake laid the alien woman on the small bed inside. He hurried to get his first aid supplies, but as he rummaged through his shelves, he realized that he had nothing that would help her. No medicine for whatever injuries she had sustained, no tools that would assist in treating her. He was completely unprepared for this. But then he remembered the plant he had found a few weeks ago, a strange, glowing herb that he had heard could be used for healing. He had no idea if it would work, but it was all he had. He quickly gathered the herb and crushed it into a paste, then gently applied it to her wounds. As he worked, he spoke to her, even though he didn't expect an answer. "I don't know what happened to you," he said softly. "But I'll help you. You're safe here. You don't have to worry." Hours passed, and Jake stayed by her side, tending to her injuries and trying to figure out what had happened. She was in a deep sleep, her breathing becoming steadier, but she had not woken up. Jake couldn't help but wonder who she was and where she came from. Finally, as the night grew darker, the alien woman's eyes fluttered open. Jake was sitting at the edge of the bed, watching her closely, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. Her violet eyes met his, and for a moment neither of them spoke. She blinked a few times, clearly disoriented, before her lips parted to speak. The words she said were in a language Jake didn't understand, but the tone was soft and gentle, almost musical. Jake shook his head, trying to explain. "I don't know what you're saying," he said, his voice hoarse, "but you're safe here, you're not alone." The woman seemed to understand, her eyes softening as she looked at him. She struggled to sit up, but Jake gently placed his hand on her shoulder to steady her. She looked up at him with an expression of gratitude, and Jake realized that despite the language barrier, there was a deep connection between them, one that neither of them could explain. "My name is Jake," he said slowly, hoping she understood. "What's yours?" The woman looked at him for a long moment, and then in a voice that sounded like it was coming from far away, she spoke again. This time the words were different. "Zara," she said. "Zara." Jake's heart skipped a beat. "Zara," he repeated. "I'm glad you're awake." Zara smiled weakly, her violet eyes glowing in the dim light of the cabin. She seemed peaceful now, no longer in pain, but Jake could see the worry in her eyes. She was alone, stranded on a strange world, and he was the only person who could help her. And as Jake looked at Zara, he realized that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet understand. The island had been his refuge, his safe place. But now it seemed that it would be home to more than just him. Zara, the alien woman from another world, had come to his island. And somehow he knew that she wasn't just passing through. She was here to stay. The next few days passed in a blur for Jake. He had never imagined that his life would change so dramatically after finding Zara. The peaceful, quiet routine he had built for himself on the island now seemed foreign, replaced by the care of a small, injured alien woman. As Zara recovered, Jake found himself learning more about her and her strange, yet fascinating, world. Zara's ship was beyond repair. After she had regained some strength, she explained in broken English and with simple gestures how her spacecraft had malfunctioned mid-flight. It was a technology far beyond anything Jake had ever seen, and when he looked at the wreckage, he could barely comprehend what had happened. It was as if her ship had been crafted by beings from another universe. Zara explained that she came from a planet called Urindor, a world light years away from Earth. Her species was peaceful and technologically advanced, but their planet had been ravaged by a civil war. Zara had been sent on a diplomatic mission, but during the journey, her ship had been struck by a meteor and damaged beyond repair. She had barely made it to Earth before crashing on the island. The more Zara spoke about her planet, the more intrigued Jake became. She described her people as tall and elegant, with abilities that seemed almost magical to him. They could communicate over vast distances with their minds, and their cities floated above the ground, suspended by powerful energy fields. Everything she described sounded like a dream, far beyond anything Jake had ever experienced. Yet, despite the wonders she spoke of, Zara had no desire to return home. Her planet was in turmoil, and she feared that even if she could fix her ship, she would be returning to a broken world. She had no family left, and her people were scattered across the galaxy. She had only one option: to stay on Earth, and more specifically, to stay on the island with Jake. Jake had listened to her story with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He had never been one to believe in aliens or far-off planets, but Zara's sincerity made him want to believe. She wasn't asking for pity or rescue. She just wanted peace, a place to heal and be free of the chaos that had destroyed her life. Zara's presence began to change things for Jake. He found himself adjusting to having someone else around. At first, he wasn't sure how to interact with her. She was so different from him, her language, her culture, her way of thinking. But as the days went by, they began to form a routine. They worked together to gather food, to maintain the garden, and to repair what little of her ship remained. Zara proved to be resourceful, using her knowledge of advanced technology to help Jake in ways he had never imagined. She showed him new ways of fishing, how to use the plants around the island for healing, and even how to make tools from the materials on the island. At first, Jake had been wary of her abilities, unsure of whether he could trust her. But the more time they spent together, the more he saw her genuine desire to help not just herself, but him as well. They started sharing stories. Jake spoke of his life before the collapse of civilization, how he had once been a part of a bustling society, surrounded by people, and yet still felt disconnected. He told her about his decision to retreat to the island to escape the chaos that had consumed the world. He had thought that living alone would bring him peace, but over time, he realized that it had only deepened his sense of loneliness. Zara listened quietly, understanding more than he could have imagined. Zara, in turn, shared more about her people. She spoke of the beauty of her world, the lush forests that covered the land, the vast oceans that stretched across the planet. But she also spoke of the devastation, the civil war that had torn her people apart, the loss of loved ones, the destruction of her cities. Her people, once united in their pursuit of knowledge and peace, had fractured into factions, each vying for control. Zara had been part of a group that sought to bring peace, but even they were unable to stop the conflict. The more Zara opened up, the more Jake understood the weight of her decision to stay. She wasn't just fleeing her war-torn world. She was seeking something that had been taken from her, a place where she could find peace, a place where she could rebuild her life. And Jake realized that he was offering her exactly that. One afternoon, as they were walking along the beach, Zara stopped suddenly and turned to him. "Jake," she said, her voice soft, "I want to stay here with you. I've never felt this safe before." Jake was taken aback by her words. He had thought about her request many times, but hearing it spoken aloud made it all the more real. He wasn't sure how he felt about it. Part of him was still unsure about living with an alien, especially one who had come from such a distant and mysterious place. But another part of him, the part that had been lonely for so long, felt a connection with Zara that he couldn't ignore. "You've said that before," Jake replied, looking out at the waves. "But what about your people? What if they come looking for you? What if you want to go back someday?" Zara looked down at the sand, her eyes shadowed with doubt. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I don't know if they'll come for me. I don't even know if I want to go back anymore. My world is broken, Jake. It's not the same. I've lost everything." Jake could hear the pain in her voice, and he felt a pang of sympathy. He had never lost everything in the way that Zara had, but he understood what it meant to lose something important. He knew what it was like to have his world fall apart. I don't want to see you leave," Jake said slowly, turning to face her. "But I'm not sure if I'm ready to have someone around all the time. It's been just me for so long." Zara smiled, a gentle, understanding smile. "I know, and I won't push you, Jake. I just want to stay here with you, if you'll have me." Jake thought about it for a long moment, the quiet stretching between them. He looked out at the horizon, the endless ocean, and the peaceful island that had been his refuge for so long. He had thought he was content in his solitude, but now, with Zara here, he realized that he had been lonely for a long time. Her presence filled a void he hadn't even known existed. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, you can stay, but we'll take this one step at a time." Zara's eyes lit up with relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. From that moment on, things began to change. Zara didn't just stay in the background, she became an integral part of Jake's life. They worked together, shared meals, and spent their days exploring the island, getting to know each other better. Jake found himself opening up to her in ways he never had with anyone else. She was kind, intelligent, and more understanding than anyone he had ever met. But as the days passed, Jake began to notice something else about Zara. She wasn't just a companion, she was someone who truly cared for him. She wanted to help him rebuild not just his life, but his trust in others. She wanted to be his partner, not just in survival, but in everything. Jake realized that he was beginning to feel something for Zara that he hadn't felt in years, a connection, a sense of belonging. And for the first time since he had come to the island, he felt like he was no longer alone. The days on the island began to blur together. Jake had become so accustomed to Zara's presence that it was hard to remember what life had been like without her. The once lonely island now felt alive, filled with conversations and shared tasks. They worked together in perfect harmony, tending to the garden, maintaining the hut, and experimenting with the strange plants and techniques Zara had taught him. At first, Jake had worried about how their relationship would evolve. He had lived alone for so long that the idea of living with someone else, especially an alien, seemed strange, even unnerving. But Zara had proven herself to be more than just a survivor. She was intelligent, resourceful, and deeply empathetic. Her insights into the world, her calm demeanor, and her deep understanding of the universe fascinated him. She had an innate ability to make him feel at ease, as if their connection had always been meant to be. Despite their growing bond, Jake still found himself struggling with a sense of uncertainty. Zara had made it clear that she had no intentions of leaving the island, but what would happen if things changed? What if her people contacted her? What if she realized that Earth was not her true home? The thought gnawed at him, keeping him awake at night as he lay in bed, listening to the sound of the wind outside. But as time passed, Jake came to understand something. He had no control over the future. All he could do was live in the present and let things unfold as they would. It wasn't about the past or the future, it was about the here and now. And right now, the here and now was with Zara. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, Zara approached Jake with a hesitant look on her face. She had been quiet for the past few days, as though something was weighing on her mind. "Jake," she began softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I've been thinking." Jake looked up from his work, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What's on your mind?" Zara hesitated, taking a deep breath before speaking again. "I want to try to contact my people. I need to know if there's any way to get back to Urindor. I know I told you I wanted to stay here, but there's a part of me that wonders if I should return. What if there's still hope for my world? What if I can help rebuild it?" Jake's heart sank. He had feared this moment. Zara's desire to return home had always been a possibility, and now it seemed like it was becoming a reality. He could hear the conflict in her voice, the longing for her home, her people, and the life she had once known. "I thought you didn't want to go back," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You said your world was in ruins, that it wasn't the same anymore." Zara nodded slowly, her eyes filled with sadness. "It's true, my world is broken. But there's still a part of me that wants to believe that I can make a difference. I came to Earth to escape the chaos, to find peace, and I found it here with you. But the longer I stay, the more I feel like I'm abandoning my people. I can't help them if I stay here." Jake understood her feelings. He had always known that Zara had been running from something, from the war and destruction of her world. She had come to Earth to find solace, and he had been a part of that. But now, it seemed that the call of her home was too strong to ignore. "I don't want to lose you, Zara," Jake admitted, his voice low. "But I can't keep you here if you feel like you have to go. I won't stand in the way of what you think is right. If you think you can help your people, then you should go." Zara's eyes filled with tears. She reached out to take his hand, squeezing it gently. "I don't want to leave you," she said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to feel this way. I never wanted to have to choose between my people and you." Jake felt his heart ache as he looked into her eyes. He had never expected to be in this position, never expected to care so deeply for someone who wasn't even from his world. But Zara had become a part of him, and the thought of losing her was unbearable. They sat together in silence for a while, the tension thick in the air. The wind rustled the leaves of the trees, and the distant sound of the ocean echoed in the background. Jake knew that whatever decision Zara made, it would change everything. But he couldn't force her to stay if her heart was torn between two worlds. Finally, Zara spoke again, her voice quieter now. "I don't want to leave. I don't want to go back to Urindor, but I need to know. I need to find out if there's any hope left for my people, and if there is, then I'll stay here with you." Jake nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "You need closure," he said. "I get it. If you want to try, then we'll try, but you have to promise me something. No matter what happens, no matter what you find, you'll come back. You'll stay with me." Zara smiled softly, her violet eyes shining with emotion. "I promise," she whispered. The next few days were spent preparing. Zara had explained that her people had a technology that allowed them to communicate across vast distances, but the device had been damaged in the crash. She had no way of contacting them, until now. With Jake's help, they worked together to repair the communication device, using a combination of his knowledge of Earth's technology and her advanced understanding of her own species, tech. It wasn't easy. Zara's technology was far more sophisticated than anything Jake had ever seen, and the task was daunting. But they worked tirelessly day and night until the device was ready. The moment the device powered on, Zara's heart raced. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew that this was the only chance she would get. She activated the device, and for a moment nothing happened. The air seemed to grow still, and Jake held his breath, watching as Zara waited anxiously. Then a soft, musical tone filled the air. Zara's eyes widened, and she whispered a word in her native language, her hands trembling with excitement. Jake could only watch in awe as the communication system came to life. A voice echoed from the device, distorted at first but slowly becoming clearer. Zara's face lit up with hope as she recognized the language, and for a moment, Jake felt like an outsider, unable to understand the words being exchanged. As Zara spoke, her face grew more serious, and Jake could see the worry in her eyes. She asked questions, listened intently, and then nodded. When the conversation ended, she turned to Jake, her expression unreadable. "They're gone," Zara said softly, her voice breaking. "Urindor, it's lost. My people are scattered, and the war has taken everything. There's no hope left. They've all but given up." Jake didn't know what to say. He wanted to comfort her, but he knew that there were no words that could heal the pain she was feeling. The weight of her loss was unimaginable. Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and relief. "I don't have to go back anymore," she whispered. "I can stay here, with you." Jake reached out and pulled her into a tight embrace. "You don't have to go anywhere," he said softly. "You're here now, and that's all that matters." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Jake realized that this moment of understanding and acceptance, was the beginning of something new. They didn't know what the future held, but for now they had each other. And that was enough. The days following Zara's communication with her people were quiet. The island, which had once felt like a lonely refuge for Jake, now felt alive with purpose. Zara had made her decision. She wasn't going back to Urindor. The war that had torn apart her home world was over, leaving her people scattered and broken. There was no reason for her to return now. Earth and Jake had become her home. Jake could see the change in Zara. The sadness that had lingered in her eyes for so long had faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. It wasn't the peace she had hoped for when she first arrived, but it was a peace she could create for herself here, on this small island with him. They didn't need to leave. There was nothing more she needed to find. They spent the next few weeks in a new rhythm. Their life on the island had always been simple, but now it felt like they were building something more, something permanent. Every morning, they would wake to the sound of the waves, and after their breakfast, they would work together to improve their little corner of the world. They planted more crops, harvested fruits, and even started a small herb garden, using the knowledge Zara had brought with her. There was something deeply fulfilling about working side by side, knowing that they were creating something from nothing, something that belonged to them alone. But as the weeks passed, a subtle shift began. Jake noticed that while Zara was content, there was still a part of her that seemed distant at times, lost in thought. It wasn't often, but there were moments when Jake would catch her looking out over the ocean, her face thoughtful, almost as if she were searching for something that was just out of reach. Jake knew better than to ask her about it, but he couldn't help wondering what was going on inside her mind. One evening, after they had finished their work for the day, Zara spoke to him as they sat on the edge of the beach, watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. The air was cool and calm, and the waves gently lapped at the shore. It was a peaceful evening, the kind that made Jake forget about everything else. "Jake," Zara said softly, breaking the silence. "I've been thinking." Jake turned to her, his curiosity piqued. "What about?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "About what comes next. I'm not sure where we go from here." Jake felt a pang of concern. "What do you mean?" Zara took a deep breath, looking out at the vast ocean in front of them. "I've spent so long running from my past, from the war, from everything that happened on Urindor. I thought I could leave it all behind, come here, and build a new life. And for a while, I thought I could forget. But I can't. I can't just forget my people, what happened to them. It's always in the back of my mind." Jake listened closely, sensing the weight of her words. He knew that Zara had been through unimaginable loss, and the pain of it wasn't something that could simply disappear. But what she was saying now was different. It wasn't about leaving anymore. It was about finding a way to live with what had happened. "I don't want to go back to Urindor," Zara continued, her voice steady now. "But I need to do something. I need to make sure I'm not just running forever. I need to figure out who I am now. I can't just hide here on the island. I need to find a purpose." Jake understood. She wasn't asking for a way out, she was asking for a way forward. The idea of leaving the island had never crossed his mind, but now he realized that for Zara, it wasn't about the island. It was about what she could do with her life. It was about making sure her past didn't define her future. "I get it," Jake said, his voice soft. "You've been through so much, but you don't have to do it alone. Whatever you decide, we'll face it together." Zara looked at him, her violet eyes searching his face for sincerity. "You mean that?" Jake nodded, his heart full. "I do. You're not alone, Zara, not anymore." Zara smiled, and for the first time in weeks, Jake saw the spark of hope return to her eyes. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, letting the peaceful sounds of the night fill the space between them. The moon shone brightly over the ocean, casting a silver glow on the water. The world seemed still, as if waiting for them to make the next move. The next morning, Zara and Jake woke up early, as they often did. The routine they had settled into felt natural now, like it had always been this way. They ate breakfast together, then set off to work in the garden. There was something soothing about the physical labor, something grounding about being outside, working with the earth. As they worked, Zara's mind was occupied with the same thoughts that had been swirling in her head for days. What was her purpose now? She had come to Earth to escape her past, to find peace, but now that she had it, she was left with a sense of emptiness. She had spent so long running from the war, from her responsibilities, and now it seemed like the time had come to face them. Zara turned to Jake as he dug in the soil beside her. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice hesitant. Jake stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "About what?" "About what I can do next. I don't want to go back to Urindor, but I can't just sit here forever. I think I need to help people. I need to use what I know to make a difference." Jake was silent for a moment, considering her words. He could see the resolve in her eyes, the determination that had been there from the beginning. It wasn't the same determination that had driven her to escape her planet, but a new kind of purpose, a purpose that was born from the peace they had found together. "I think that's a good idea," Jake said finally. "You have so much knowledge, Zara. You could help so many people. Not just on Earth, but everywhere." Zara smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. "I think I could, too." They spent the next few days discussing what that might look like. Zara could use her knowledge of technology, of her people's history, and even the skills she had learned from Earth to make a real impact. They could find a way to help people who had been affected by the wars, by the chaos that had consumed the world. And in the process, Zara could find a sense of purpose, a way to contribute to a world that had become as much her home as Earth had. As they worked together, Jake couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had never imagined that his quiet, solitary life would lead to something like this. He had never expected to be part of something greater, but now, with Zara by his side, he felt like they could take on anything. Together, they would make a difference, not just for themselves, but for others too. And so, as the weeks turned into months, they began to lay the groundwork for their new life. Zara contacted the few remaining survivors from her world, offering her help in any way she could. She began to work on building a network of people, Earthlings and Urindorians alike, who could work together to rebuild and heal. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but with Jake's unwavering support, Zara knew that they could do it. As the sun set on the island one evening, Zara and Jake stood on the beach, watching the waves crash against the shore. The horizon was painted with colors of pink and gold, and the air was warm with the promise of new beginnings. Zara turned to Jake, a sense of peace settling in her heart. "This is where I belong," she said softly, her voice full of contentment. Jake smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "And this is just the beginning." They stood there together, watching the world stretch out before them, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it as partners. Together, they had found peace, and with that peace came the chance to build something that would last, something bigger than themselves. And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, Zara knew that she had found her purpose. Not just as a survivor, but as someone who could help others, someone who could make a real difference. Earth, with all its beauty and chaos, had become her home, and Jake, the man who had welcomed her without question, had become her family. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Zara felt ready for whatever came next.